So the year started with me taking photographs of lots of lovely wintry trees. And then I did a video about showing you how to edit them so you could then use them for lots of other processes like making this jelly print and all these other sorts of transfer. I even turned it into an embroidery, and I made these two different sorts of journals that you can take pages in and out from, so really adaptable. I was doing a lot of free motion machining, working towards a big quilt about cabinets of curiosity. And because of that, I did a video where I showed the technique where you can do this type of embroidery, which is a really useful skill to have. The effect I was trying to go for was that they are in a cabinet, so I wanted these to be slightly proud of the other pieces and to look like they might be a frame or shelves or something like that. And I was also doing lots of jelly printing onto plates and using my own photographs of flowers. And I liked it so much, I decided to adapt the technique onto fabric as well. And that was quite interesting, seeing how well I could use the same things with the jelly plate and with these thermofax prints, which are like screen prints, and in exactly the same way of sort of building up the layers. And this is the first panel that I made onto wood with all the layers, and then, if I can hold it properly, here is a almost finished big panel on fabric. I also started doing some printing using this, making a little book out of envelopes, and this was using the last of the sort of wintry foliage that I'd kept. And you can see the video where I explain exactly how I did this. And it's such a simple way of making a book, but really effective, I think. And you could adapt this in so many different ways. And I started picking some spring foliage as we were getting to that time of year. So I've got daffodils and hellebores and primroses, and I did several sorts of different printing with those. And I made a spring booklet or version of the wintry one with all these different print techniques. And also, during the year, I was painting a full-size ox as part of Ox Trail, which is a public art trail in Oxford. So I had what became Bluey. He came to live in my garage for a bit. And first of all, I did lots of spraying to get into the colour I wanted. And then I worked out how to produce the cyanotype effect that I do a lot, but recreating that with stencils and paint, which took a lot of thinking about. And there's a whole video about how I made this, came to this decision of how I did it. And then here's the finished ox. I did some more jelly printing with some more lovely foliage. I always go back to ferns. They're my first love and my last love. And I did lots of zingy colourways. And I did a little tour around my garden, sort of showing you what it looks like in spring. I adore tulips and I have lots of them, so I talked through all the different sorts of variety that I was growing and how I'd solved a problem when last year rats or squirrels dug up all my tulip bulbs, but I came up with a solution that solved that. And of course, I couldn't resist picking some of this luscious spring flowers and foliage and pressing them in my flower press in order to use for some printing later. And as well as doing the big tulip panel, I decided to do two more. So this is using a photograph of one of my irises that I had transferred onto organza. And then I built up these layers and did a lot of free machine embroidery. And this was the panel with the stitching done, but before the finishing part. And here are the three panels, how I displayed them as part of my Art Weeks exhibition, which took place in May. And I opened for a few days, had my house open and my garden open, and I turned my studio into a cabinet of curiosities and put all sorts of weird and wonderful things for people to look at, like shells and grasses and all my interesting books. and I also had some displays in my living room. So it was all around the theme of a creative garden and looking at natural history and how people have classified plants and classified objects, which plays into the Cabinet of Curiosity theme. And it was really good. I really enjoyed it. And I enjoyed it so much that I'm actually going to open next year as well. With a similar theme but slightly different. So there'll be some new work that I'm working on for that, and I'll be sharing that and different techniques in the new year. And then I did a Capturing Summer series where I saw how well I could jelly print and other sorts of printing with some summer flowers and plants. And I was surprised how well these alliums took. Some of them turned out better than others, and I go into that in the video for that. I also did lots of cyanotype printing, and I developed a kit that so other people could have a go themselves. So I did a little demonstration that went along with the kit, and this is one that's just exposing and getting bluer and bluer out in the sun. And then because I'm always a bit extra, I decided to make a cyanotype top that would match my ox, and I could wear it when we had the launch for the Ox Trail public trail. Hello, so it's quite a breezy evening, but I'm out here to show you my top. We're just about to go to the event at the Bodleian, and yeah, I'm really pleased with how it's turned out. And this was my favourite clip from the launch, which kind of sums it up really. So here is Bluey at his final destination at the wonderful Churchill Hospital, and he's in this lovely courtyard. I couldn't be happier with the position. Just after my exhibition, I went on holiday to the Netherlands and Germany, and I prepared a sketchbook to take with me that already had some colour on, so I didn't have just blank paper, and there's a video where I go into that. And then I did some work while I was there. I took a little jelly plate and an art kit and did some things there. And I also collected ephemera. And then when I got home, I added other things and decorated it. And there's a video where I show how I prepare the book, how I used the book when I was away, and then how I finished it off afterwards. And then back to the Capturing Summer series. And this was when I used some fennel and some other kind of umbellifer type of flowers. And I was experimenting with different types of paper. And of course, I went back to my ferns because I can never do much printing without those. And this is using some other seed heads that I dried and using different papers and a slightly different technique with this. And then I had a go at something I've been wanting to try for a while, which is using Play-Doh with objects, and you can pick up some really fine detail. And this was a really fun method that I enjoyed sharing. And I also was, instead of using my usual acrylic paints, I was using some water-based relief and etching inks. And I was really pleased with the result, as it was like the first time I think that I tried these, and you get these really sort of ethereal, thin layers of the ink, and you don't have the worry of things drying quickly like you do with acrylic. So they're quite a good medium to be using when it's sunny. And I used some of the objects from my Cabinet of Curiosities, like these ammonite shells, and I think I tried with a nautilus shell as well, and got lots of lovely prints from those. And then I did quite an extensive bookmaking session. I made 3 different sorts of books, and I demonstrated all the different ways that you can either alter an old book, or you can make one with simple stitching, or you can also use ring binders. And I go into quite a lot of detail about how you can do the stitching and the proper knots to use and all the different techniques involved in that. And then I obviously had to fill my books afterwards, so I had different themes for each one. This was quite fun because I decided that it wasn't so much a theme, but just lots. I wanted lots of bright colour with this one, so I decided for on a couple of pages to do a rather fun rainbow effect. And there was lots of different things came up as I decided to have a circle theme for this book, and then I realized one looked a little bit like the moon. So you might choose one kind of way of doing something, and then that sparks lots of creative ideas for other ways of doing it. And I'm going to come back to making small books. I'm actually going to be doing a course, so there'll definitely be more content about that. And this was the book I made before I had decorated it. So you can see I put sort of lots of interesting pages, some prints that I already had, some bits of old map, and other ephemera like old books that I got hold of that were kind of falling apart. So I didn't mind taking them apart and reusing bits of them. And it just means you get a kind of really unique work that nobody else will have. And then I went back to my jelly printing and I showed a way of how you can print straight from magazine pages. And I was trying out these new eco acrylic paints. So that was quite an interesting thing to be trying. And this was getting sort of like late summer, early autumn. So I did a series of kind of autumn prints using autumn colours and leaves like these beautiful beech leaves. And I think the first one was some Virginia creeper, and just getting some really sort of subtle, beautiful effects. And I also made my own calendar, which was the first time I've ever done that sort of thing. And I gave some tips about how you could, if you wanted to do your own, which I did it with an online company, the sort of tips that it's useful to know and how you can prepare your artwork. And that was a really fun new adventure to go down. And because I'd really enjoyed printing with those inks, I got some more and some brighter colours and used kind of the last of the sort of summer flowers. I got some dahlias and some cosmos. And with these inks, you sort of get a lot of detail and some really sort of subtle colour combinations. And then just when I thought I wouldn't see any more oxen this year, we were asked if we would decorate these miniature ones for another special fundraiser for Sobel House. So I did Sylvia, who was a botanical ox, and then this is Copernicus, who's a sort of little steampunk ox. And I thought I would finish the year by making some Christmas cards. So I gathered lots of holly and ivy and yew and I pressed them. And I did quite a lot of experimenting to get the effects that I want. Quite a few things didn't work out, but in quite a long video, I showed the ones that didn't work and the ones that were more successful. And then I followed that up with another video where I showed how I did some finishing touches, how I could correct prints that hadn't turned out as well as they might, but to be able to turn them into beautiful Christmas cards. And I did use these for friends and family. And I also did some gift tags using the same method and then using a die cutter to print them out. And using a die cutter is something I'm going to come back to. It's a piece of machine that you can use for all sorts of things. You can just do scrapbooking with them, but I found that you can use them in a really creative way. And I'm quite excited to show you all the different ways that I've managed to use it. So that's going to be a video that's coming up soon in the new year. Really appreciate you watching, and there'll be lots more in the coming year.